5 new grandbabies, all under 2 years old. So things are happening.
Okay, everybody on YouTube, I transferred over to another live stream. So if you want to hop over on that other one, we'll leave this one up for the time being.
And it might work a little bit.
And we'll see if that is a little better, it's a little smoother for you guys. So if you wanted to slide over to that and give it a go ahead. Yeah. Instagram, it looks like you guys it's fine still good for you.
Yeah.
Everything seems good. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, great job, everybody, this year. Got a lot of really nice deer. What a season. Just lots and lots of bucks were shot. I've never seen checked stations double before. That was phenomenal. You know, they're especially like Stratton and the Aquasic, just so many deer really got shot this year, way more than normal, which may make it a little tougher the next couple, 3 years if they, you know, did that much of a job on them. But here we are in our 13th or 14th winter, a mild winter in a row. So like New England has been really lucky that way. We very few hard winters. So the deer are actually doing really good. Fawn recruitment was great. I was around here with all the rain we had this past summer. Almost 23 inches in July. I was a little worried about that. You know, a lot of young fawns, if they get poured on day after day all summer long, which this was like an incredible like record year of rain for the Northeast. And boy, we got pounded here in Vermont especially. And we saw very few fawns around here. Boy, not hardly any dead on the interstate, hardly any like tracks in the woods. Like boy, around here, the fawns took it fairly hard. Up in Maine, I gotta say though, it was kind of the opposite. We saw lots and lots of fawn tracks and lots of does with twins up there this year. So that is really good. And that's another thing I want to get into, a little bit of buck age class structure, kind of how it works and the ways to think about it. That's another video or short that we're going to be putting out here pretty quick, how I like to do that. Button bucks, you know, that's a big deal. And the more button bucks that you have that make it through, and they are the greatest buck on the land, that, you know, the biggest numbers of bucks on the land, that is super important to 4 years from now, coming up to a 4-year-old. So we're going to talk about that a little bit too. That was a really nice one. Taylor, are you seeing any questions or anything? My glasses don't quite.
I'm just getting this queued up. I'll roll back through the.
Yeah. Loved everybody's content that they made this year. Some of the videos were phenomenal. It's so nice to see so many channels that are out there tracking and following deer. Corey Ryder's 10-pointer there out in the open, you know, that he filmed. That very few people understand the skill it takes to just grab a camera, walk around on the landscape in places that are really heavily hunted and film a whitetail buck just kind of doing his thing. That is so difficult. And even if it's a small buck, when you go to a big buck, boy, that's even harder. And it is kind of like it's turned into the holy grail, even more than shooting them, to get a beautiful buck on film. It is hard to do on your feet, on the ground, walking around, making it happen. And this year here, boy, there was like no wind this year. I was like, come on, wind. And we only had a couple, 3 days where it was semi-windy, and that was about it. The crusty, crunchy snow coming and going all the time, you know, real quiet conditions where the deer could hear you 300 yards away. It was that kind of season, and boy, that made it tough. I know a lot of folks, boy, they didn't see squat for deer, and then others did really good and saw quite a few. It's always hit or miss, right? But I was just amazed at how quiet a season it was, and that made it super difficult with the woods being noisy and them able to hear such huge distances. That was definitely a big deal.
All right, so it seems that everybody is having a better time with the second live. So I'm gonna keep this one. We're gonna keep Instagram on, and I'm actually gonna close out this live, and then we'll put this up, and we'll get it swapped over, so that way it's a little less laggy. So everyone who's on this that I'm pointing at exactly, we got like 5 different cameras. Everyone over here, go to the other live on YouTube, and then we'll keep rolling. So Dad, go ahead and keep going.
it's always an experiment to get all of your equipment to work, and then to understand how to run it properly, and especially on first time around. And that's kind of
You
what
guys,
this is. This is a first
did you ever
time
see the
around, so-
Matrix? You ever see the second Matrix when he goes in the room and it's like the big room
Bubble.
of camera screens and like TVs? That's like what we have going on here. So we're getting it kind of figured out. So bear with us, everybody on Instagram. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
hanging in.
Yeah.
And somebody asked, do you guys mount all the deer that you get? Yes.
Yeah, I need to do some. I've been working on customer stuff because to me it seems more important than doing our deer heads, and I must have 15 or so that need mounting for us. I definitely, and I have quite a few that just we need to take the time, and I don't want to be behind. And people who've been waiting for their deer a long time, I almost rather do theirs than mine or the boys, even though, like, truthfully, yeah, some of them have been sitting around for quite a while, and I need to do them. Yeah, definitely a deal. The taxidermy since COVID has like exploded. There's tons and tons of people mounting stuff. I've never seen nothing like it.
Oh, yeah.
This is 39, working on 39 years of doing taxidermy, and I've never been so swamped. Never had, of course, the expense of all the stuff that you need to make everything is kind of climbed right out of sight. Tanning solutions and urethanes, the prices just went berserk. Shipping has been berserk as well. The whole plugging up of some of the, especially stuff that's made in China, or like the chemicals for tanning and stuff like that, when we had all that ship problem stuff over in California, and everything came in to, Port of LA, San Francisco, stuff like that, and all those boats couldn't get in real well. And especially like with Mackenzie Taxidermy Supply, all of their stuff's in North Carolina, so they'd have to ship it across the country. And if it couldn't get in over there, they were almost willing to have it come through the Panama and come in the other way, through the Chesapeake Bay. And then Panama started having trouble. It was real dry down there, and the lake that's in the center of it, the level was low, and the number of ships that could get through there. So like all these things kind of just slowly add up to all the trouble. A lot of especially tanning facilities and stuff are run by less older people, and when you're super busy and you can't hire anybody and you're 75 years old, right, some of them companies, Tohican, went out of business. Carolina Fur Dressing went out of business. They were huge suppliers of an industry, and that's kind of general through all stuff. Especially Tohican went out of business. Mackenzie scrambled to get eyeballs for a while. So now some of the other companies that do it are catching up, and so like it's trying to fill in the gaps and retool, and everybody do the best they can. That's kind of what everything's been suffering from somewhat, but like it's not a super big deal, but sometimes it can take a while to get specialized foam or special oddball things, versus the regular stuff. So that's been a little bit of an issue, but kind of coming out of it now. But overall, like the cost of everything is just turned into something, and it's the same with groceries or anything else. And of course, we're just doing the best we can and just hammering as many as we can and doing as good as we can. And you can only go so fast and do a good job. So I'm kind of at that ceiling now where I'm just doing the best I can as fast as I can and still keeping them looking good and just doing the best you can, But other than that, great season. Great to have so many of you, having a good time. I have to admit, there was a lot of 2-year-olds this year.
Oh yeah, bucks. Yeah.
People were shooting 2-year-olds like crazy. A lot of the 140 to 170 size deer, New England was loaded with them. So this coming year, there'll be quite a few 3-year-olds. So that'll be good as well. Kind of looking forward to some of those giants that made it through.
Yeah, right.
We were chasing just a few. There's only a few that were great big giants that were kicking around, but they're so well trained now, it'll be tough to get them, definitely. Tough finding them big, huge deer. This was not a year for that. There wasn't very many of those. I want to say Stratton only had just around a dozen or so 200-pounders out of 220 deer.
Yeah,
220
it was a
deer,
lot.
which is about half the number of really big deer that would normally be there. So the the amount of pressure that it's getting is starting to show just a whisker. But
Do you guys set a limit on the mounts, and what would the wait time be? So do we have a cap? Do we have
yeah, right now I'm a solid year and a half out or more. Right, I'm right between 2 and 1.5 years wait right now, and I've kind of stopped taking them. Anything that's come in just in the last little while here are just people that we said yes to before we were totally plugged, and or they're real good customers that we've been dealing with for years. And you always have your loyal customer base, and you want to do well by them. So we've been trying to do that. I'd love to be able to take in more people, and in the future maybe we can get back to that, but we'll see.
Yep.
Yep. Yep.
Perfect. Well, everything looks like it's going great.
Yep. Let us know what you got for deer this year, and if you called your deer in when you were tracking.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that is really taken hold. It's one thing to track a deer, but it's another thing to call in a deer. And if you can do both, and using tracking to get close enough to a deer to call to it. We had a fella, he's like, I am so glad that you guys, I just did what you said. He's in Minnesota. He walks out into the woods, finds a big track from the road. He's driving on timber company land, and he says, I found a big track, and I did what you said. I got out and started following it. It just went a short ways. It was right in the beginning of November. Walked out through, following it in the snow, doing a little bit of calling. He says, I got to where it was feeding and not going that far. It had made a buck rub, and then it started some feeding, and there was a whole bunch of blowdowns and stuff, so I went real slow and just kept calling. And then all of a sudden, behind a blowdown, he just stood up and stood there staring at me. And he says, I couldn't quite see just exactly what I had, so I just waited, and I called one more time. And he said, then the thing started walking, and I could see the rack, and it started coming. And he says, it came walking just like grunt buck. It came walking right up to me, and I shot the deer, and it was 260 some odd pounds and 150 inches. So he sent us a picture, and he's like, this is what I got listening to you guys. And so that is awesome. Just love to hear stories like that, or where somebody jumped a young buck and called to it, and it stopped and stood there and let them move a little bit, like Casey did this year. Casey did the usual, get them close, walk up to them, get fairly close, call to them a little bit, use the call to help gain you a little time to get a shooting lane, which is what he did. And got his shooting lane, and then managed to even hold his phone and hold the gun and everything, and boom, and he did it. And so glad to hear so many of you are doing that, and it's working for you. That's just an awesome thing to do, and it adds to the chances of you getting a shot at one or something. I did have a fella in here the other day. He says, if I'd have told, I think it was Cale Pellin's dad, he says, if I would have told my father that you could grunt to a deer and call to it and talk to it, my dad would have laughed at me. You can talk to deer,
Yeah.
right? You have to speak their language, and of course that's what that was. And he says, now, what a difference. There's this telescoping effect that happens with everyone learning, right? Everyone puts out a video, they listen to everybody's methods. You pick up little things that will add to what you could do. If you sit in tree stands, you would pick up things. If you call, or if you use scent, or all the different methods that people would use to hunt. Everyone can start relating, and there's this telescoping skills that happens with everyone sharing how they go about it. And it is made, we may be half the hunters in Vermont. We used to have 125,000 25 years ago, and now we're down to in the 60s, 65, 68,000, something like that. So we have half the hunters shooting the same number of deer. So that's incredible. And it goes to show the skills that the people who are still hunting, and still at it, how their skills are so much better.
Oh yeah.
That was huge. That effect of everybody being able to, you add the technology of number one, Onyx, right? Looking God's eye view at the ground. The cameras sitting in the woods 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That person, it's like a person sitting in the woods for you all that time, watching and looking and seeing things. that amount has made a huge difference to the productivity of the people who are hunting, and we are definitely better hunters than our fathers or grandfathers, for sure.
Oh yeah.
You know, and it has made a huge difference. And also too, it kept everybody like in there. And if you were a little lonely or didn't have no one to hunt with or whatever, you could kind of hunt even a little bit through the camera with us, you know. So that has been inspiring. So many people have wanted to hunt with us, and I wish we could have everybody go, but of course we do our best to let you come with the camera and take the time to do that. The actual hunting that we're doing is kind of, we're not hunting much.
Minimal.
We may be there for 6 weeks hunting like every day, like it's our job, but we're actually filming every day, more like it's our job. We're doing a combination of hunting and filming, and we're thinking about shots and trying to get wildlife on film. And we might sometimes commit 2 hours of our hunting day just to getting some moose on film, just trying to, and our, one of the points of what we do is that we would be able to show you what we see every day. Now, that's not an easy thing to do, and sometimes you don't see squat. Sometimes it just doesn't all work out, you know. You can have those days when just nothing is happening. So, you know, everybody just going out and having a great time. Started grunting without a tube this year.
Nice.
And because I was watching you, had a doe and a fawn walk right into me. I was amazed. Yeah, like there's some realizations of like how good you need to sound, and you may, if a grunt tube than you do with your voice, and you like the sound of the tube better, you should be using the tube. There's a realization though over time of how it almost don't matter, and deer sound different. There was a great video that we watched. It was a short of a buck grunting, and it was like at 2 feet from the camera, and he's holding this big, long grunt, and it is so awesome. And when I watched that, I was amazed by that. That was just awesome. Just really good. So glad to hear that. And it goes to show how you call and the way you call. Just do what you think would make the difference for that, you know, and you'll be able to do pretty well. Yeah, we had just had a shipment of hats come in, so we're back into hats again.
Yeah.
We got cleaned out there.
300 orange ones. It was like, oh my gosh, we were
shoot
hoping to
through
have
them
them
all.
for the
Appreciate
classic because we
everybody.
like giving those away and stuff, and we didn't have them, so that was kind of a bummer. But thank you for everyone who has been supporting the channel. That's pretty crazy. We really appreciate it.
And all those young people that signed our hats, thank you so much.
Yeah, that was really cool. Yeah.
That was
one
great.
of the things, there's a lot of things that we have in the works, and one of them is bringing on or at least expanding our team of editing. One of the things we want to do is we want to actually bring on an editor for the channel, because like him and I, we're just so busy. We're so busy with everything that we need to do in the shop and in the field and like teaching and making the videos, and so. We have a few people that we're talking to about potentially being an editor, and if anyone's interested about being an editor, you can always DM or email us too, because we're kind of feeling that out. You know, and that's just gonna help us get more content out to you guys. It's gonna help us just convert all like our tapes. Like one of the things we want to do is to go through all the tapes in the bathroom, because we have this rack up top, and those are all like high 8 tapes from like when it was just him hunting in Maine with the guys and us boys weren't into it yet, and you know, some really good stuff like back in the day, big buck hunting things.
Yeah.
So
Brian, he says, how much do you call in the later part of the season?
not a ton. Not I tend not to, but
It'll vary. If you think the deer in that area do get pestered a lot by calls, and if they've, like if you've been busting a buck a couple, 3 times, walking up to it and grunting it and busting him and off he goes, you may be educating him, you know. So like later in the season, if you do that again, it probably not gonna work so good. There may be areas though, and especially like over time, I think a buck may forget about it just a little bit if you've only done it once and it's been a week since he's seen anybody. that definitely may be a little bit of a, it may be okay. The other thing too, though, sometimes is that they may not go crazy when they first hear the call, but they may be more investigative and slower to react and spend more time watching and listening. One of the greatest examples probably was Corey's buck. I watched when Corey Ryder filmed that 10. In the beginning, I got interrupted in the middle of that video, so I really should rewatch it. But you can hear a buck. He's out into a cut and he calls a little bit, and you can hear this blowing, the deer blowing at him. And I think deer blow at each other quite a bit, almost like, I know you're there, right? And set the stage as I'm another deer. And he might have been doing that a little bit, and then maybe the deer moved. I'm not sure if it was the same buck later on as he films him out in the cut. But the deer, once he was out in the cut and he was more relaxed-ish, and he was out there, and maybe Corey gave him quite a while, moved, and then could see him. He can probably relate to this a little bit, but that buck, when he was out in the cut and he's listening, he spent a lot of time knowing right where that sound came from. Remember, it's a deer's job to know where sounds come from. They locating, triangulating, and finding the location. I've had quite a few of them that, boy, even at a couple 300 yards, they know right where that sound came from, and they go right out around and come right back, and they know right where, they walk right up to the spot where you were. I've seen guys in a tree stand call to a buck that's 200-300 yards away, and the buck does a hook and just goes right to that spot. And he only heard it once, and he knows right where it was. So I think if a lot of times later in the season, when they've heard some of those, and they know right where it comes from, now they're going to spend a lot of time watching, listening, focusing on that spot. And if the wind is a little swirly, they may be to where they can, let's take our time and really check and make sure. The other thing that goes with the calling and the walking and the movement is that you're also mixing sounds together that could be another deer. And I think later in the season, when they've had a lot of deer activity with other deer, during the day, they may be more cautious because they've never been busted at night by a grunt, right? It's always been during the day that calling has messed them up, and they may be more standoffish during the daylight hours. And at night, hear nothing but other deer, and it's always safe at night, and they get going. So like first thing in the morning, the grunting may work better than it would in the afternoon when they know people are about. Deer are so good. They're so good at patterning us. They're probably better at patterning us than we are at them. And this calling to them and grunting and tracking and busting them and stuff like that will educate them in a very short while. And if you got a buck way in the back of some place that hasn't seen too many people, you don't think, and it's late season and you walk up to him grunting, you may very well fool him just as much as you would earlier on before they've been pressured too much. So, but if they have been pressured, calling to them might not be as good. Does may be more sensitive to grunting, especially. I know cow moose are very sensitive after the rut. Cow moose are very sensitive to bull grunting. They do not like bull grunting.
So are bulls. And the bigger ones, they're like, nope, want nothing to do with it.
So, like, you're going to have to, it's your call. You know, it's your decide of whether you ought to do it or not, or whether it's a good idea.
Sounds like some people have had use your walk up and grunt technique this year during muzzleloader season in Maine, and holy crap, so few big boys up close, and wow. It seems like it's working for people too, though.
It is. You
guys have been grunting and moving in. We don't do a ton of rattling. That's not something you used to rattle when you were bow hunting. But not a ton anymore.
For me, I got busted quite a bit. And also too, it makes them a little worried. Some at the right phase, like just as a zombie walking gets to going and bucks are more interested in bucks, I would think that would be the peak time. That's where I've always had the best luck rattling, would be like just as they're starting to wind up. They're laying down a little more sign. They're just starting the zombie walking, like November 8th to the 12th, 13th, when they really, especially the big ones, circulate like crazy. I would think that's when rattling would be the best. That's when it would really do something. Yeah. And also too, when there's the tending part, when you have a doe in heat and the bucks are tending, following her, right with her all the time. And when they meet up, then you're gonna have a scuffle, same as moose would be doing, I would think. Those would be the two optimum times. And then maybe even real late in the season. Little rattling might actually work really good then too, I would think. I'm kind of limited on the amount of rattling I've done. I've probably only rattled in 7 or 8 different buck, and nearly every one of them was on the downwind, just about to get me, or they did smell me or whatever and then run off. I've had very few come charging right in, but I did have I did have 2 buck fight right in front of me. I could hear them this year. I think they were both 2.5-year-olds, and they thrashed on each other for about 10-15 seconds and then broke up and took off, and they were about 50 yards the day you shot your buck.
Yep.
They got in a fight right in front of me there, and they busted, and one chased off the other. They went down from one cut across the brook up into another cut, got out in the open, stopped, and then I came down through, come up over and caught one of them and just saw the hind end of him a little bit, and apparently he could see me, and he busted and took off. And the other one, because one moves real quickly and they just got done a fight, but they're still kind of together a little bit. One moved quickly, the other one took it as, oh, he's coming after me again, and they took off running. And again, I couldn't do anything, and I was starting to follow the 2 of them, and I think I probably could have done something film-wise for sure. I probably could have at least got one of them or both of them on film pretty quick. They were right there, and then I heard you talking, you'd shot your deer. So, and they weren't big buck anyway, so I just left them and went right on to help you with your deer. But that did happen in front of me this year. And the one that was in front of me was real passive and just kind of hanging out in a cut, and he wasn't doing anything. And the other one was down in the block of woods down where Taylor was, came bolting up, crossed the road, came right up into the cut where I was, and he was doing some jumping and hopping all the way up through there. And he did a 90 degrees when he smelled my buck and ran about 150 yards and just smashed right into the small buck, which he must have known was in front of me. 2.5-year-old, probably 160, 70 pounds. This other one was the same deer. He just came right up, turned and went right into him and just kind of smashed right into him on a dead run almost. When I figured it out in the cut there a little bit, he smelt him and just came right into him, and just the 2 of them went at it, and then off they went. And pretty cool thing, you know, and I wish I'd have had a little more. I got quite a bit of how it all went down and stuff on film, and that'll be a video too, but it was just, you know, one of those things.
Yep. And we have a Ryan's video, and I'm sure a lot of you are like, hey, you guys got another buck in Maine. Where's that?
Right, we got to get that
Ryan's
one done.
video is coming. It's just one of those things that, you know, we're doing our best to get these videos cranked out. That one's a beast of a video. And that's one of the main reasons why we decided that we need an editor. So
we did so much.
So we're getting on that, guys. Don't worry about that.
We got to decide what parts of it we want to keep. So there was just so much good stuff, and there was a lot of film. We spent a lot of time filming this year. Got a lot of good moose.
When do you slow down or speed up on a track? I jumped a buck many times in the past season in Maine and usually wouldn't end up catching up to him again. Any advice on when to slow down or speed up? By Tom.
For me, what the buck was doing in the beginning, if say he was just fairly relaxed and laid down and you came along and bumped him, I'd give him a little bit. And go real easy, hunt super slow and easy, and just take your time. And he'll jump off, right? He'll hop off for a ways, and then he'll probably do a hook and stop and look back. He may not hook very far. It might be 3 feet. It might be 50 yards. You never know. They a lot of times they'll pull up to some place. They've got a little bit of a view across an opening or something and look back, and then like, what just got me up? And they'll stay someplace and really focus on movement. So I give them a little while. You got to be careful jumping right on them, especially if you walked up to them calling. If I get a buck laying there and I come up through calling and he hops off, he's just nervous. He wasn't sure. And if I'm pretty sure he didn't smell me and he just saw me or something and then just hopped off and went a ways, I want to try and get him at that 100 yards that he jumped off. So I'll go super easy. When I get up to the bed and I see, oh, he hopped off. Say I didn't see him go and he just jumped off someplace. I'm gonna really focus on the direction he headed. I'm gonna look at the terrain up in front of me and try and decide where I think he went, just guessing, looking at things, and then see which way the wind is blowing too. A lot of times they'll go up a ways. Say you're coming up a mountain, he's on a shelf and he runs up a little higher. And if the wind is going to one side, odds are good that he'll climb some and then swing downwind a little bit. So as I start up the tracks and go up towards him, I'm going slow and easy, and I'm especially watching the downwind side of things. A lot of times when you're tracking, the deer aren't necessarily right in front of you. They're off to the sides a lot of times. It's real easy for them to just do a little bit of a hook, and downwind is a kind of a normal thing, especially since the coyotes have been around. When I was a kid, it wasn't so much, but now it is. They get jumped by coyotes a lot, and they want to smell them coming after them, and them hooking and running downwind is part of them knowing it's a coyote and he's still coming and it's after him, and so they want to smell their back trail. So a lot of times they'll hook the downwind side. So I'll go real slow and look for him there. The other thing is when you jump them and they take off and they just jump off a ways, a lot of times they'll go around something and feel more safe, and that's where they'll stop. They'll go through a thick spot, go through an open spot, and stop just on the other side of the open spot. Or if it's a big opening, they'll go to like an island, a big blowdown, a tree or something in that open area. That's where they'll decide. So I'm looking for these islands, almost like I'm fishing, and I'm trying to see where I think he would swing up through and stop, and then take my eyeballs and really pick it over real good and go nice and easy. If he smelt you, say, you're coming up and he smells you and he definitely winded you and or definitely saw you really good, or even if you saw him run off and now he charges up the hill and he just goes and he stays steady. Bigger ones especially, you get them up and they've got a pretty good idea what you are. Now they're going to be steady. They'll jump off 5, 6, 400 yards maybe of jumping off pretty good and getting after it, and then go to a stride. The big, huge ones will go to a stride and they'll just kind of hold it. They'll hook and stay downwind some and just hook right along with the wind and hook the mountain and stay steady. They'll be pretty steady. They'll stop, look back, not leave their tracks too much, just stand and listen a lot, and then off they'll go again. And if he does some pull up and stop, and then he goes a ways and pulls up and stops, those are key things. You want to notice those things. It's so important because it means that he went for a ways and now he's checking. And if he doesn't see anything, he feels a little better, but he wants to move some more. There'll be these like security stops, check, go, check. If he does some go and check and stuff, I don't go real fast because he's looking back and he's on it. If he stays steady and he never looks back, he never checks back, and he just goes to looking for does or just goes from mountain to mountain or whatever, just go right ahead and walk right along. Keep your chin up, right? Always your head up, always looking for deer. If you lose where the track is on the ground every now and then, and you have to stop and look down and figure the track back out again to stay on course, then you've got your chin up enough, right? That was one of Lanny's tips a million years ago. He'd say, walk along steady, keep your chin up, and if you lose the track on the ground every now and then because you're so busy looking for deer, then you're doing a good job looking. Every time you come to an opening, don't bust out into the opening. Look out into it without coming out. And then if he's right there someplace, you have a chance of seeing him, stuff like that.
When it's really windy, do you start looking for tracks near the downwind side of the hill or ridge? Found some moose concentrated on the leeward side of a stormy, colder day.
Most of the time, if animals have to pick a place to hang out, they'll pick the lee roll side of the hill, right? Say you have a shelf on the southeast side of the mountain and the wind comes from the west over the top. And when it comes over, it does a spin thing, right? That area just over a third of the way off the top, down over, and the wind does this and swirls and goes back and forth. That's where they want to lay down. They have the best chance of smelling everything around them. The wind goes this way and goes that way and goes this way. And all they've got to do is get one little molecule and they know something's up. And a lot of times when they do take off, they'll go with the wind and with the cover and hook down off or something. Deer love to hang out. And moose, same thing. Love to hang out where there's this in the wind. and it goes that back and forth all over the place thing. They love those spots. They're generally a little warmer too. The air tends to lift around them, and it's not this constant breeze. The west side of the mountain on a windy day, they get cold and it's too much. Where you feel good and you want to take it easy, those are the spots they do too.
Do you guys have, do you ever have any good success bow hunting? And if so, you ever think of filming it, or have you filmed it at all?
Yes, I actually have. Donnell and I was digging through some of our old VHS stuff, right? And I found a video of Teresa's brother, my brother-in-law. And Donnell shoots a doe with his bow right out back here, and we're in tree stands, and I'm a little higher, and she comes right in, and he shoots her, and she and down over the bank, and she flopped down the bank about 50 yards after he shot her. She only ran like 12 yards and started to tip over, and then slipped on the bank and went all the way down the bank and died down over the bank. And the two of us went down there in our blue jeans and rubber boots, right? Like didn't even own camouflage back then, right? And just went down there, and yeah, we've filmed a few of them. I used to bow hunt a lot, and I probably shot, I don't know, a couple dozen deer with a bow. And just I've kind of stopped bow hunting. The taxidermy has been so busy, and I can't hunt like all the time, so I chose to rifle hunt instead. But I love bow hunting. It's really personal. That's one thing about bow hunting.
Yes, it is.
It's very personal.
It is not the same as a rifle.
It's a beautiful time of the year, and you see lots of game. And when I shot a deer with a bow, I felt like a hunter. I felt like a real hunter. When I shot my first buck with a bow, I'm a hunter now, and it was quite an experience for me, and I just loved it. It's a beautiful time of the year to see lots of game. You're very comfortable. I'm not the owl I used to be. It's kind of an owl way of hunting, sitting up in a tree stand and waiting for a deer to come along. And you do get to see the deer up close and personal. When they're walking underneath you in a tree stand, it's so beautiful, and you get to see them so good. And now with the new ground blinds and stuff, you can do just as good in a ground blind, and people are just loving that. And the same thing, you can sit in the edge of the field and watch, and you can have a group of people, you can have your kids with you. That part of it is so awesome. I love everyone using crossbows and having good luck with those. There's nothing wrong with them things. I can remember a day when the culture was so dead set against them, and now it's like it's just a bow, and you just go out there, and it's not the end of the world. And people have gotten over some of that stuff, thank God, and it's fine. And if anything, it makes recovery a little better, and people are good with them, and I like that part of it. And
and
bow
it's like
hunting's fun.
some people can't use a regular bow, and they have to use a crossbow, and if it works for them, that's cool.
Yeah.
And it's like, as long as you're doing it legal and not hurting anybody or whatever, who cares?
Yeah, and in the future here, if we can gather a little more time for ourselves, I would definitely do a little bit more bow hunting. And nothing wrong with bow hunting, because I've seen many a deer or a rabbit this year.
Yeah.
He shot his first 2 rabbits with a bow.
Yeah, that worked
this
good.
year. He's like, I never shot a rabbit with a bow. I said, well, let's go out. So we went out behind camp, and we plugged 2 of them in about 45 minutes there.
Yeah, it was fun.
And it's a great practice for tracking and seeing game. It's great for stalking and learning. So we went out there, and there was an inch of snow, and not even hardly an inch of snow.
Maybe.
And
crusty too.
Yeah, real crusty, crunchy,
no depth
loud.
to the tracks at all.
Yeah.
So.
And he's like, I said, no, let's just go behind camp right here. So we just walked out behind camp and just, oh, there's one, and he made a headshot on it, beautiful, and he got a couple of them, and we got those on film too, and had a good time. It boils down to, now if I'm going to kill something, I'm just going to shoot it. And even with a muzzleloader, I'd rather see muzzleloader season gone and just shoot them with a rifle and call it good.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter, and I'm not against muzzleloader hunting, because it's fine, but they're practically a rifle, and at some point, like, why don't you just take a rifle and shoot them? What's the difference, right? It kind of boils down to that for me now, but it has been a great way to keep your doe herd under control, and archery, especially here in Vermont, is the main way that we do it, and it seems publicly acceptable, and everybody likes it. The muzzleloader early and the muzzleloader on snow are good things. I like it, especially on snow, for the recovery. Muzzleloaders a lot of times will have a hole on one side, and that's it. It doesn't always come out the other side, so.
Your thoughts on hunting over bait or food plots? Is it cheating or not?
I wouldn't call it cheating.
I don't think so.
Why would that be cheating?
Well, if you're baiting in a state that you're not allowed to bait in, that's probably cheating.
Yeah, right, yeah, if they don't allow
but
it,
in general, having a spot where deer come to feed, that's like picking an apple tree and putting a stand around an apple tree. Is tracking cheating? Like the deer has no chance of being like he can run but he can't hide. Is that cheating? Game cameras cheating. Like the whole, as soon as you start saying like, well, the methodologies in which you find deer or the trying to pursue them, whatever, that gray area of what's cheating and what isn't cheating as far as fair chase is concerned, it's like we're using guns. Like the most not cheating way to do it would probably be to just walk out and like try to bite him or just choke him. But like we're people and we have tools and we use our minds and we use strategy and we're just using what nature's given us to do our hunting. So in a way, probably not. It's just kind of like up to personal preference and your ethics as to how you like to hunt and what you like to see and what you want the experience to be. And as long as you're doing right by the deer and by your fellow hunters in general, I don't really think it matters all that much. Plus, food plots are an amazing way to, like a lot of people do food plots but don't hunt over them. Like some of our neighbors here.
Well, it's habitat work.
They just, this guy, Ray's he's got a massive food plot and he doesn't deer hunt anymore. He just likes doing it, and he might put out a camera and take some pictures and just see what's out in the woods. And, it just depends. It's up to personal preference. And anything you do for the deer isn't necessarily bad in general. If you're managing your woods for a deer yard or whatever, it's like, that's all cool. You can put in a food plot and hunt over it. It depends on you.
I was there when I went to all the meetings when CWD kind of first surfaced and Vermont got scared of it and said, well, maybe we ought to do something about our game farms. Maybe we ought to do something about everyone feeding deer in the wintertime, and a little worried about, them, number one, overwhelming the local land wherever the feeding spot was, concentrating deer so that they'd be easier to pick off, predator wise. Also too, they'd get run over or things like that. And I was there for all these meetings. And when they did talk about no more baiting and no more feeding deer, which are kind of almost the same, and they were discussing that, the fact that food plots were out there came up as well. And the general thought behind it all was that people would start caring about the habitat. Now, habitat is wildlife's number one problem. It's not antis, it's not hunters, it's not industry as much as it is habitat. And everyone protecting and taking care of habitat and having a good place for them to be naturally is key. And, that's the reason you keep the deer numbers down, is so that you have nice, healthy habitat. The habitat is the number one concern of, you have to have a place for them to live. So when this whole, in Vermont, this whole banning baiting and banning feeding did happen, one of the side effects that we were hoping for, and the board was hoping for at the time, was that it would keep the deer spread out on the landscape properly to where the landscape would hold them well. It would also get people to think about habitat. And if everybody did a little bit of habitat work versus putting out food, and it was natural and they could come to it on their own when they wanted to, and it wouldn't only benefit just deer, but it would benefit songbirds and predators and everything. And to get the average person more oriented towards the landscape and how the landscape was doing, and then have that be the driver versus a bag of corn. It seemed more productive and better, and it was a step in the right direction to people caring about the land. So that's one of the side effects of doing that, and that's why we did it. And it was a good thing, I think. When are you boys going to come back and hunt at the Wizard with us? That I don't know. I wish we had time to go everywhere. We used to hunt Pittsburgh quite a bit. Had a great time in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh, New Hampshire was an awesome place to hunt. It did get a lot of attention back when the state record came from up there. There was this huge influx of people that went there. One of the things about Pittsburgh is that it's one of the first places to get snow. So Mount Washington, Pittsburgh, and Rangeley are usually, if snow hits in New England, those are the first places to get it. And that Canadian plain, one thing about Quebec is it's really flat, and as soon as that air comes across that flat and hits the first few mountain ranges, it lifts and dumps snow there. So when the moisture is just right and it's raining and 35 degrees in central Vermont, well, up there it's snowing. So that extra snow was why everyone would go there. If you were a tracker, those were tracker woods. What it did, though, over a short while is it made Pittsburgh deer wilder than wild, because they had been chased and chased and chased all the time. And any deer in the mountains where there's lots of snow on a steady basis and there isn't snow in other places, every tracker in the world runs to those areas, and those deer really get pressured really hard. Then after a while, they're 200 yards behind the tree running like crazy. Right? It trains them. And by the time a buck gets to be 3 or 4 years old, he is on it. He doesn't miss a trick, and he'll really have to make a mistake to get shot, some of them. As the cutting, one thing about COVID is when timber prices went berserk, the cutting in the Northeast, in the industrial part of the forest, the cutting just zoomed. I know Weyerhaeuser, in one of their first quarters of COVID, made $750 million extra in profit. They upped their production 15% with a 1% tool cost and made $750 million extra in profit. So it goes to show, like, when you follow the money, you'll know what's happening in the woods, and the animals will be affected by that. And this surge in timber and needing to cut it and it being valuable, it changed how the woods were managed. It changed how the amount of cutting. When prices are really high, you tend to cut smaller trees because now they're worth it. Big trees are always worth a lot of money, but it's better when the price is high. They're worth even more, but you generally don't go after them as much if you have a lot of small wood around and you want to cut it. The time to cut it is when the price is real high. So you attack small wood when prices are high. And that's why you've been seeing so many trucks with pencils on them, because the price was worth it. So they cut into that small stuff in order to get some of that medium age stuff cut and used and make room for some new stuff to come in as well. And stagger your age classes so that if you're going to be there for the long term, you want trees that are all different ages.
What are your thoughts on the push for more restrictive coyote hunting and trapping laws in Vermont?
Well, coyotes are here to stay. We're at a saturation point, if you ask me. They've been around for a long time now. And the amount that we've seen, the highest amount that we've seen in all the time that they've been around, we're at the saturation point. They're kind of a self-limiting kind of thing. As there's lots of coyotes, they lower their numbers of babies and they don't produce quite as many. As soon as you create a vacuum and you shoot them like crazy in one spot, now all the sick and the interlopers and the young from other
kicked out groups
now move into that area. So you get this mixed bag of who's around and what they do. And like if they're killing your sheep, then you shoot them, because they're just going to teach your babies to kill your sheep. But if they're around and they're not bothering anything, they're not in your sheep, then you leave them alone, because that alpha male and female will have babies, and last year's babies will help raise this year's babies, but they're the only two breeding right there. And then their young will have to move off and find other territories. So if you have coyotes that aren't being a problem, leave them alone. It's the best thing. And then if you have coyotes that are being a problem, you want to shoot them. You want to do a job on them. And maybe someone new will move in. No matter what, you never eliminate them. That book about the fella Crabtree in Yellowstone, The Track of the Coyote, a fantastic book about coyotes. It is just, every deer hunter in the world should read that book.
Yeah,
it is phenomenal.
Maybe we'll do a video
what can be done and not done. And he's killed.
Yeah.
We spent millions and millions and millions of dollars on coyotes and never got anywhere with them. They just turned into more and more and spread everywhere. And they're filling a gap that nature needs, and now that niche has been full, and we got rid of the wolf, and this thing moved in. We needed a new kind of alpha predator kind of thing, and we got one, and they're here to stay. If trapping's kind of brought a lot of controversy to everything, and I'm a trapper, right? I think everybody's a trapper. If you've got a mouse in your truck, you're a trapper, right? That's what we had this year.
You don't have to use your fan in your truck to trap it. Most of the time, you use your mouse.
I ended up trapping a mouse in my fan in my truck this year, right? So now when I've got a mouse trap, I'm a trapper. And I'll hold a hunter safety course, and I'll say, okay, who in here is a trapper? And I might get 2 or 3 hands. And then when I hold up a mouse trap, all the hands come up, because almost everyone's done it, right? Trapping's one of those things, like, you can't eliminate it. And if you do try to eliminate trapping, what you'll end up with is you'll still have trappers, but they will be trappers, number one, who don't pay you and help you out. They will be, they won't need permission to do it. You will have no idea how many animals that they kill, because it'll be a homeowner that wants to protect. It'll be somebody who moves in with chickens and is mad and catches the mink, and now doesn't notice it, or just leaves it in there to die because he doesn't have the heart to shoot it. That you could end up with a lot worse kind of trapper than you have now. And he won't be paying you to help, right? That's one thing about sportsmen and trappers, houndsmen, right? They're paying the department to help with the biological information. If you have employees that pay the company
to work,
and you want to get rid of that system, you're an idiot. Right? Because right now, the best possible system in Vermont, I'm pretty sure that we have one of the longest bobcat kind of studies that's gone on in the whole U.S. And we've been turning in our carcasses, and they've been checking them for sex ratios, checking them for DNA stuff, also collaring them and following them and studying them. And Vermont has one of the best biological setups that nearly is anywhere in the U.S. And to take that whole system that's been working good, people have been paying in, they've been heavily regulated. Trapping is heavily regulated, and that's what you want to do. If you want to control something, you don't ban it, because the opposite will happen. Massachusetts banned it, and they got the opposite of everything they wanted. They got worse trappers, they have more problems, more critters on the land, people care about the critter less. It's a nightmare, and it didn't work out for them. And if anybody around here thinks it's going to work out here, no, it's going to be the same exact thing. And what you'll end up with is you'll have to pay someone to do it for the department. You'll have to pay someone to go out and gather information when they used to pay you, and they went out and gathered the information. Trying to undo that system is the dumbest thing in the world. And it doesn't serve, number one, the biology. It doesn't serve the wildlife. It doesn't serve the people. There's so few people that do it anyway, and their effect, you have to do things that are measurable. And you have to do things that make sense.
But at least you know what's going on.
But at least you got an idea what's going on. To take your finger off the pulse of bobcats, and to no longer know how many bobcats are on the landscape by any means whatsoever, that doesn't serve anything. And it's counter to the department's mission statement. Yeah, for sure, right? The Fish and Wildlife Department's mission statement is all wild places and all wild things for all time, for all people. Not just trappers, not just antis, not just hunters, not just houndsmen, everybody. And right now, this system needs to know how many bobcats are on the landscape. And this is the only way that we have any finger on the pulse of what is happening on the ground. And for the department to give away their authority and not follow the mission statement, which everyone agrees to, and to bow to anybody, they're not doing their job. Yeah. They are supposed to be the least biased, the most logical way of knowing what's going on the landscape, and giving not only that, but if you get rid of the right and the wrong of trapping, Just the psychological war part of it, if you get rid of that and you say, well, if we go this direction, these are the consequences. If we go this direction, these are the consequences. It's the department's job to present those things. And if they're not doing a good job at it, you guys ought to tell them. That's my opinion. If anyone is not working towards that mission statement when it comes to the department, or someone wants to change that mission statement, all wild places, all wild things, all people for all time, and the North American model, the support of that North American model, and someone wants to undo that, it doesn't get more un-American than that, right? This is the best model that's ever been set up for wildlife governance and protection and science and ever been. Why would you want to get rid of the best thing that's ever been? Stupid.
All right. Nice.
Northern Minnesota.
Do you guys ever kill deer in bogs or swamp? I always see trackers avoid them. Yes, all the time. Casey's last 2 deer,
Especially in the last 3 years.
Yeah, Casey's last 2 have been down in the swamp. Mine this year was down in the bottom. Well, one of the things that dictates that is in Maine, where we've been hunting and we spend most of our time deer hunting. The woods, all of the good timber that's mid-mountain is what gets logged, and the stuff that's down in the bottom where like the terrain is wetter and it's really marshy, stuff that you can't really get machinery in because it makes a mess and they'll get stuck or whatever. That's where the mature wood is, and that's where the cover is for deer, or it's way up on the rocky cliff junk. So like in Maine, where we've been going, the mid-mountain deer, like they're all eating in there because that's where all the new growth is, but where they're staying and hanging out and where you tend to catch up to them is in the tops or in the bottom. And Ryan's buck was way up top. Casey and I both shot deer down the bottom. Dad's deer last year, way up in the top. That's just kind of the new norm. So
all the giants, like
people
this year,
don't, yeah,
same
people
thing.
don't want to hunt in there because you have to get point blank, and like we've been shooting all of our deer at like 35 yards or less in the last like 5 years, probably as a result of that. And that's kind of probably going to be the new normal for how a lot of areas are, is that's wherever you get the snow, wherever the deer are hanging out, if you're tracking, that's just where you have to go. You're going to have to go down in there. And it's also the best place to still hunt, is on the edge of cuts where it turns into the mature growth on either end of the elevation. That's really where you're going to want to walk around and check for runways and sign and things like that. So that's kind of going to be the new normal, I think.
The last 3 years, we're like, you got to go where you don't want to go.
Yeah.
I'm driving down the road and I see this wall of garbage. That's where you got to go. So just, okay, slam right into that stuff, go through it, thicker and crazy, and then all of a sudden, whoop, little tiny opening, boom, deer. That was the case this year, and they were on the edges of those openings near the swamp and water and garbage and ice and beaver dams and places like muck and junk. That's where they were, was down in that stuff, especially when the snow had been around for a while and everything in the middle and easy walking had been chased. So they all went to these like terrible, terrible spots where you think, I can never go in there and get a deer. That's where the deer went to get away from everybody. Or it was steep, rock, cliff, hardly be able to get up in there. Mountain goat stuff, they were in that as well. Yeah, like where there's really no reason to be there, but they needed to be left alone. And as the woods, especially where we are, it's cut off. It's all cut right off, and they feel exposed. They want to get away from everybody. They dive into all that garbage. That's definitely where they were. Yeah.
Where is your favorite place to hunt whitetail?
Wherever you go. Most of the time, I like the most romantic spot, right, is 3,000 foot mountain up on the top for me. Like that's like up in the fur with the wind blowing and in the top of the mountain. I like that. I like the coming around the corner on a mountain. always coming up and over. If the weather is cold and chilly and stuff, I can warm up and then go easy and slow and hunt a shelf. And then if I'm cold again, climb back up in there and then go again. And sometimes the wind is a little more predictable in places, so I like that a little bit. I have been going into the swamps now, and I like the swamps more than I used to. I'm getting better at looking through what seems to be a wall and then picking out a deer. We've got some video. I have this small buck. This is going to be a decent video too. I take a big buck across the road, drops down in a swamp, and I start down in there after him, and a small buck comes up the track at me and then turns to the side, and I'm sticking with the big one, but I see this fresh buck right here, and it's like 1.5 years old. So I just kind of, oh, there's a buck over here, and I keep watching to that side, but I go down through, and sure enough, that little buck comes back down in and starts going back down the track he came up from, and he does this circle, and I come right in behind him, and I walk right up, and you'll be able to see him in the brush in front of me. And I picked that thing out at about 60 yards or so, and it is just this wall of stuff. And even when I'm zooming in on the camera, you can't see anything until I get right up to his face, and then you can see the horns, and he's looking at me and sniffing. And I'd been walking and calling while I was doing that, especially once he came back down and he was real fresh right in front of me. I'm like, oh, he's right here someplace. So that was really cool. I am going down in the bottoms and the junk more now. You have to go a little slower. You got to look for movement. You got to really pick the brush over really good. A good set of binos makes all the difference in the world. There's something about it, just bringing it like this and then a little extra focus in an area, and then have a little extra power too. You can see into the openings beyond stuff, and binos will slow you down and make you way more thorough. And I don't know how many times where the binos come up and I look real quick and then, oh, there's some hair right there. And it's just one little brown patch of hair that I would have never seen with the naked eye that I could pick out with that. So, and any kind of binos that you're comfortable with that work. Doesn't matter, binos are binos. I do like Sig's new, they have these ones that are super steady. You can wiggle and what you're looking at doesn't move. Oh, I like those. I'd like to see a pair of them. Those would be nice. But
do you guys practice running shots or learn as you go?
We did. We
used to.
I don't practice as much anymore because I do pretty darn good. Like I haven't missed a running for a while now, but I haven't taken a running in quite a while either. I haven't had to. I've been good at stopping them or timing it a little bit. Most of them have been sort of just kind of coming in my direction some. The piece of cardboard with sheetrock screws on a tire and roll it down the hill and shoot at it. A dot in it at first, and then later on no dot. Was great practice. I did that with the boys like crazy. I also did a lot of shooting just pointing without using your sight or your scope. Just pick your gun up and point and shoot like at a gravel pit or something. That is such good practice, the point and shoot. You want to do that like crazy. The boys and I don't have any problem hitting stuff just pointing and shooting now. And I do it with a pistol all the time. Daniel Horton, my God, did he make my pistol shooting like accuracy triple. What a difference to his method of bring the gun up, hold it, that kind of stuff. Just phenomenal. I couldn't believe how good I could point it. And you can do the same thing with a rifle. Practice it. Take a 22, go to a gravel pit, and don't use the sights. Just pick up the gun and point it and shoot it and get good with it and practice. And after a while, your ability to get on target will be so phenomenal. The other thing I did have to practice a fair amount was learning to do it both eyes open. If you can understand and be able to, some people can't do it, but if you can understand that both eyes open, and when the crosshair, only one eye is seeing that crosshair, I can shoot a scope both eyes open, because with both eyes going, when the crosshair is on the deer, pull the trigger, you'll hit it. Now, it'll be this weird kind of picture of seeing a gun, seeing the deer. Part of it is focused, and it's this kind of weird kind of thing. But when you're able to do that, like you'll be able to shoot in between the trees when the crosshair's on the deer, just pull the trigger and you'll hit them. And Mr. Rogers was about 35 or 40 yards, and he was not quite a full gallop kind of run, but he was like a canter kind of thing. And I shot and I hit right where I aimed, and then I reloaded and shot again. And the second one, I hardly aimed at all. And them 2 bullet holes at about 40 yards were 2 inches apart. I just shot again, right in the same exact spot, right behind the front shoulder, boom, and then boom, one more time. And he just boom right over. And that second one, boy, did that do a job on him. And it just, practice. And if you're not good at it, well, practice. You'll need to practice more. Shooting is one of those things, the more you do, the better. There's a reason, Lanny is shooting those bean cans out of the air with his 30-06 ability. He's probably shot way over 100,000 skeet in competition. That matters. Oh, does that help, right? That point and pow, and you do that a little bit, just amazing what you can do. And it'll give you an opportunity where the other guy who hasn't practiced that, and some of them big ones only give you 3 seconds. You gotta make the most of it. It's tough, and you have to be as ethical as you can about it and do the best job you can, and then go from there. Yeah.
What kind of rifles do we use? Dad uses a 7mm Rem mag. So do I. I have the Hawkeye version. He has the M77 Mark II.
Yeah, the all-weather stainless.
And Leopold scopes on. He has a Variax 2 or Variax 3, a 2. A two.
The older 2.
Yep. I run Sig's Buckmaster on mine. It was just something I picked up because the gun was a gift a long time ago, and it came with just this kind of like dime store scope. And then I ended up getting the Buckmaster scope, which I think is a 3-12 or something like that, and it was like $99. And of course, Sig's optics team is a lot of the people that were on Leopold's development team. So basically, if you buy a Sig optic, you're getting a Leopold optic. It's basically the same. Vortex is good. Anything on that.
Whatever works for you. Like any kind of equipment.
Yeah.
Like I like stuff that works good. That new scope that's on the that 2 to 6 or 1 to 6. That
1 to
6 power that he got on that
the
Sig
on the cross.
I would put that scope on my deer rifle and wouldn't even think twice about it. I would get the one that matches the caliber, and it's actually designed for both eyes open. That scope, it's just that I like that scope. It's good. I would put one of those right on my gun.
It's kind of a bummer that you can't see and you can't zoom up quite as much because it is a 1 to 6. Like 6 is pretty good, but like I had mentioned earlier, we're shooting all of our deer at like 35, 40, 45 yards. Like if you're getting 75, 100 yard shot on a deer where we're hunting, it's pretty uncommon, and you can still do that with a 1 power scope. You can still hit a deer at 100 yards like nothing. And of course, inside that, it's also got a drop for distance, and it's got windage marks in it. So, you can just pick that thing up and pull the trigger, and you're probably going to hit it. It works really well.
Yeah.
I saw another comment. The gun that I used to shoot my deer this year, the Sig Cross, I like it. There's a lot of things that I would do differently on it. It's a gun, and it's a caliber that's big enough to kill a deer. As long as you're comfortable shooting and you know what you're doing, you're probably going to be fine. And it's such a specific thing. There's a lot of things that are pretty neat about it. The price is a little heavy. But it's a really good gun. If you're going to get a gun to shoot and just shoot all the time and do long distance and get into that, it's a great gun. It's probably one I would pick over our 7s just because, like, you take the 7 to the range, you put a box through it, it's like you're done. You'd have to change that rifle a little bit to really put a lot of ammo through it and not get sick of it. Because like we've shot some 300 Win Mags and put a couple boxes through them, and if you have the right setup on it, they don't kick at all, and they're really usable. So that's fine. The gun thing, we had a lot of people ask us about the Cross, and it's a firearm. It's not that big a deal.
It's a tool.
It's like any other gun. As long as you can hit, a lot of people like the pumps. A lot of people like the lever action still. It's like, it doesn't matter. As long as you can make good shots with it and you're accurate and you do right by your deer, who cares?
You'll always shoot a gun you like better than one you don't like.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? So that right off the bat, that tells you whatever you like, whatever seems to work good for you, run it, right? It don't matter. Whatever you like, it matters. Yep.
Are we going to be at Huntstock this year? John, yes, we're going to. We're definitely going to be in the one in Westminster, Mass. We're still on the fence as to whether we're going to be able to go to New York or not. We most likely will. 75% chance we'll be at New York. We'll keep you guys posted as to where we're going to be and when. So we'll let you know about that. That was been good. What are your thoughts on lead-free copper bullets? I like the thought of lead-free venison, but the bullet grain tends to be a lot lower than lead bullets.
When you look at they took an X-ray of a ham, a deer's hindquarter, and they shot it with a lead bullet. The number of minute fragments that's in that meat, like when you see an X-ray of where it hit and it boom and all the pieces, there's little tiny fragments like spread out in that. It definitely
Toxicities in volume, and that's one of the
Right.
things like people have to remember. It's like you've probably consumed a lot of substances that in certain volumes will make you very sick, but it's like what's in your food now. If you eat a little bit of processed whatever that's got a chemical that's probably not good for you, if you eat a little bit of it, you're gonna be fine. If you eat a little bit of lead, it's not the end of the world. If you're eating a lot of venison and it makes up a ton of your diet, it's probably not the worst thing in the world to go. Like I use a copper a lot of times in my 7. The first round in there is a copper, and I use a soft point second in my chamber. And one of the reasons I like to do that is the copper bullet stays. So if I do have to take a running shot at a deer or something like that, and it's a running shot I'm confident with or whatever, and he's straight away or something, I want the penetration up into the vitals, and I want to get the deer and I want to kill him. They tend to expand less. They tend to blow up less.
They retain their weight and energy.
Soft points. So the soft points are for like boom and explosion. The coppers tend to be better for penetration. And I tend to run that a little bit. I do that. That's not necessarily a worry about lead kind of thing. But it's up to you. If you're eating a lot of venison and you really tend to shoot the heck out of your deer and you're putting a lot of bullets in them, it might be something to think about.
243 American. That's a great gun.
Yeah.
Great gun.
Did you get the Woodsman arm stock repaired? What are your thoughts on this incident?
Well, I was supposed to bring it up. Timmy Bulldog was up to the Classic, and he brought the stock up, and then I forgot to bring the gun up. And we got up there, and I'm like, oh, and he wanted to put it back together, and we're gonna see him shortly. Anyway.
Yeah, he's gonna hop on the podcast.
So yeah, we're gonna have him on the podcast. So we're like, okay, let's just and no big deal. We'll get it fixed. But yeah, for sure, it's one of those things.
That was one of the number one things people say to me at the Classic. They're like, "Hey, I saw the video of the gun." I was like, "Oh yeah, you get that fixed?" I'm like, we're working on it.
Yeah,
we're working on it.
Yep, pump action. That's what Casey have is a 760 pump.
Yep.
He loves that. He's got the green laminated pump in a 7mm 08. And just loves that thing. He actually runs ballistic tips, and he loves them things.
One shot in the front.
One shot, and most of the time it's in the neck, and down the thing goes, and it's done right there. And he's just been dropping them all, just bang, poof, down they go, and it is what it is. Myself, if that thing is huge, I've seen some huge bucks like soak up a Magnum right square in the shoulder, and then just run off like you hadn't touched them, and you blew their whole front shoulder to smithereens. And some of them just like, they're powerful, and deer are tough. And like, I want something that's got some weight to it and penetration. I want a hole on both sides of the deer. I want something that goes through the deer. I don't want a hole in one little pinhole up high and it goes inside, and now all the blood's inside the chest cavity and it never dumps on the ground, and it's bare ground and the thing runs off, and I got to try and find it, and it's most likely dead. And I have to spend an hour and a half trying to find something that's only 150 yards away, deader than a hammer. Like, I don't want that. I want a bullet to go right through and come out both sides. One of the issues with muzzleloaders is that, right? They'll hit some bone or something on the way in, expand quite a bit, and then get caught like an arrow in a carpet on the hide on the other side of the animal and not penetrate and make a exit hole. So it'll be in the skin on the far side, and I want that thing go all the way through. I want it running out. I want that blood to come out of that deer and leave me a trail so I can find it. I hate the one hole in and nothing else happens, But, to each their own. One thing for sure is that ballistic tips they touch anything and they just go poof. and they get big.
Yeah, they
and
walk.
They'll expand, and then when they do hit, it'll make this splat on the outside and not penetrate very deep. And some of the
Straight copper
huge
soft
kinda-
points tend to break trail through brush a little better.
They
That's
hold
what-
together. They retain their weight and just keep kind of pushing. I want something that holds its weight and goes.
And that's something that we have to be very mindful of brush where we are.
Yeah. That 350 Legend, hearing tons of good things about that.
Yep.
Definitely.
Yep. Yeah, the 7 mil kicks a little bit, but you know, you don't really feel the recoil as much when you're pointing at a big rack buck. You don't notice the gun going off quite as much. So
I've kind of been used to it somewhat, and I can shoot a couple boxes, and then I've kind of had a rush. But
Yep, for sure.
if it's offhand, it's not as much. You shoot the 7 prone, you know, or bench rest, and it does really boom quite a bit.
Did Rodney get a deer this year? If so, where's the video?
No, I didn't get a deer this year. No, I
Picky. Passed up on like 11 buck. It's like, come on.
No, not that many.
It was more than that.
But you know, I know
More
what's
than
in those
that.
woods, and like as soon as you see a big one, I saw a big one right out of the gate. Ryan and I'm like, we got to go up in here. This is the biggest one. Let's just go up in here and have a look. He's usually right about here. We walked up and that thing was right there. And Ryan couldn't get a shot and he ran off. And all we see was this. And after that, after you've seen a giant, he's like, shoot it. And I'm no, I'm not doing that.
No.
Yeah.
I'm kind of tore up between the 350 Legend and the 450 Bushmaster.
Again, whatever you like. I'm sure they're probably a little bit difference in the price to shoot them. I want a gun that I can afford to shoot so that I'm practiced with it. And
That will get the
I'm
job
good with
done.
it, right? You know,
Yeah.
not that you can't substitute another gun for a lot of your practice and then pick up that one and kind of finish your practice season with the one you're going to be using. I would put the boys on 22 all summer long, and they would just shoot 22 till I would just buy them brick after brick after brick, and they would just shoot till they were bored, and I'd make them shoot some more. And then once they got that down real good, okay, now we're going to step it up to bigger guns and start shooting the bigger guns, shoot more shotgun. So that there's some swing and both eyes open, kind of ready for anything, but also too some precision, boom, 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 a little bit, and really get their trigger pulled down. Dry firing was another thing that was really good. If you buy some of them shells for your gun that are made for dry firing, and you learn to click and get your trigger pulled down so that you don't move, one of the best lessons I've gotten lately that I sort of applied and didn't know I was applying, but wasn't real conscious about it, was aiming before you shoot, aiming during your shot, and then aiming after your shot, and aiming the whole time. Now I know, Daniel was good at this. He's like, pull the pistol out of your hand, bring it up in front of your chest, hold it underneath your dominant eye, point it to the target at about 10, 15 feet, point at the target where you think it ought to be, get this nice and steady and stable, and point it right where you think it ought to be, and pull the trigger and see where it hits and see the feeling of it. Now adjust and fire again until you get that feeling of it. Now fire 3-4 shots, bang, 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 and he's hitting like a quarter at about 15 feet, and like almost 5 shots, like bang, 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 and like just do this. So I do it and I hold it up there and I just and then adjust and bang, 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 bang. Now he's doing it with a semi-automatic, slide action, and I've got a boom. Single action, boom.
Which changes the game.
Which changes it, right? But I did it. Whoa. After a while, at 20 yards, I can hit a soda can without aiming almost all the time. Underneath the dominant eye, right at your sternum height, and just boom, 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 and get that feeling down. Get the feeling down. Don't be afraid to spend some ammunition, but also have a target where you can see where you're hitting, so you understand what you're doing. Then boom, 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 and wow, did that pick it up? It would be the same thing with your deer rifle. Get that feeling for it, get used to it, use it all the time, and then after a while, beware of the man who uses one gun all the time. He knows it.
Do you have any recommendations for tire chains? Almost lost my truck in a bank last year.
Oh boy, anything
track
that'll
was
go on and stay on for at least 30 seconds for you to burn your way out, right? Yeah, no, boy, yeah, careful where you go. And sometimes the edges are soft. This was a year where the ground was super soft. We had so much rain, and if you did get off on the side of the road a little bit, it was an issue. Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Good morning, Mother. Teresa's here, everybody.
Good morning.
I grew up over the hill from you guys. Very cool. What do you use for a sabot weight and powder combo in your muzzleloaders?
The 250 grain. Okay.
I'm gonna try and make it with this.
All right.
Yep. Hi, bye. Love you.
Usually the
Hi, good morning, everyone.
use the 250 grain. Those would work pretty good. You know, like a slug. You know, for a handgun, them 250 grain type deals. In the Woodsman Arms, I have a 45 caliber, and I tried everything, even the saboted round ball. I shot everything in that Woodsman Arms, and it didn't care. It shot good groups. They were all in alignment up and down, left and right, I mean. They're all in alignment. And then the height of where they hit was just the grain weight that I was shooting. I kept the powder the same for everything, and I just flung them all. And of course, a lighter one went higher and a heavier one went lower. And then you could sight the gun in for whatever you chose to use and like determine whichever smallest group does the best and then go. And I did that. I did shoot the 120 grains of the super powder there, the Blackhorn, and wow, did that stuff rock and roll. And I was like, let's turn that down a little bit. So I went right down to 100, and that did much better, and I was able to do it without it worrying about kicking so bad or anything like that. This one here, the battery's gone in my phone, but
I'm gonna move you guys around a little bit because we got some battery stuff going on. So,
but overall, I turned it down to 90, and it had great groups, and just I stuck with those and had good luck. So it's preference of what the barrel likes, and then preference for what you like and you hope to be able to do, pressure wise to attain the distance or whatever else that you think you needed out of your. Just experiment and try it all. One more would be great for this side.
You just hold that right there.
Yeah, I'll hold it right here. Yep.
We'll figure out this whole deal out here in a minute. Okay, let's try that. How's that? Is that gonna be relatively something here? Or
Yeah, that should be pretty
slide
good.
this forward. This is quite a little setup. If you guys would laugh if you saw what we were doing, but trying to get
Just about there.
this working. As long as the phone will stay up there. Instagram, all right, everything's looking good.
Yeah, I'm gonna slide that a
He
little
thinks
bit.
everything's a touchscreen, guys. We're
Well,
trying to
I
get
keep
that-
grabbing the screen, trying to just slide it like it's a phone, and you can't do that on the old computer. But yep.
Oh, I put Timothy triggers in all my deer rifles. So those made a huge difference. We
Yes.
put one on Ryan's rifle.
Yeah.
His stock one's terrible.
Ryan's Ruger was like 12 and a half pounds. It was way too much. Like when it came to long range stuff, he was having such a hard time hitting it, and his gun's really pretty accurate. And we switched over to a Timney trigger. What a difference that made. Oh, even he's like, man, I can just do it.
I can shoot.
Yeah. And when you think about it, you want it to be like 4 pounds, 3.5 pounds is what I like. I want to have to physically give it just a little bit, and then have it smooth, so it just and goes. 2.5 pounds. I have a target rifle that's 2.5 pounds, and when you think about it going off, it does, and that's just not quite what I want for deer. If all of a sudden like the doe stepped in front of it, and I was in the middle of pulling the trigger, and boom, and all of a sudden I had to back out. I don't want like that super hair trigger. I want them, on purpose.
How far are you out for taxidermy? Long time.
Yeah, we're about a year and a half or so, working between 2 years and a year and a half, 17, 18 months to right in that ballpark. Yeah. I don't know. when you got a couple 300 to do of anything, I have no idea when I'm going to get to number 250, and I don't know how long. You can only guess ballpark kind of thing.
Yep. Yep. I use Matt as well. I have an AR-15. Nice.
Yep.
Nice recommendation.
I shot an AR a little bit. These seem pretty good. They're fairly fast, reasonably accurate. Matt had one, your cousin there, and
Yep.
we sighted that in a little bit, and it shot pretty good. 223 is a little light for deer. I like something a little heavier than that, but it isn't that it won't do the job, because I'm sure many a deer has been shot with one.
When calling deer, have you noticed increased deer activity tracks in the area the day after? When calling moose is here in Northern Europe, some moose are kind of delayed on arriving during the night, like showing up,
Oh.
calling, and then them showing up later.
Yeah, with the deer, most of the time, if you're using a call of some kind for deer, I would say maybe the hearing range might be 300 yards at the most. So it probably, no delayed reaction kind of thing, or extra just checking out the sound and coming later or something, don't see much of that. They're either gonna react right then or not. If there's a delayed thing, it might be a half hour or something, or maybe an hour at the most. Most of the time, they're either gonna react and come or not. Moose, if you're doing real long range, say you have a bugle of some kind or something, and you call like into a big quiet valley, and it's a half mile, a 3/4 of a mile, or a mile even across, you know, you're in Alaska or Canada or something, and the moose is way off, you might get a delayed response, and they'll say, oh, I'll head that way, and then come across the valley feeding and just working their way towards you, hoping to run into you eventually, kind of thing. I can see moose would be a more long range kind of thing, where you might get that delayed reaction to them coming afterwards. Elk as well, probably. Deer, not so much, because you're not calling anywhere near that loud and trying to reach anywhere near that far. So that would probably not be something there. Thought about using a thermal monocular. I did this year when scouting and while hunting. What my eyes missed, the thermal doesn't. Yeah, that's going to be a kind of a thing in the future. Like if they come out with the Starship Enterprise tricorder, and you're able to go wee, 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 and say, oh, right over there's something. Yeah, I suppose, you know, the day's coming when we'll know exactly where everything is, and we'll be able to just annihilate it at any minute, I guess. Yeah, you can be into that. I kind of go the opposite direction. I'm doing my best to make sure that they've got a reasonable chance. I'm not overwhelming them somehow. And I'm trying to figure out, you know, I want to give them a reasonable chance. And I've already picked the hardest possible way to do it, and probably the hardest possible place. And at some point, you know, it's up to you, I guess. You know, I guess a dead deer is a dead deer, and if you really want the deer just dead, that's one thing. I'm not so into the deer being dead as I am the dance of the two of us, and I want them to have a reasonable chance. And if a young buck, I let him go, and later on he turns into a legend that's really something, and then I get him, I feel good about that. But there will be a point where probably you want to try stuff that could be really cool. I think the thermal for drones and finding animals, finding a dead deer, say, on the ground from the air and just picking that out could be really handy. Drones have implications, of course, but, you know, it is what it is.
How are your beagles holding up?
Oh, my God. Do I have it down here?
Oh.
It may not be. My pants, I have 2 pairs of Beagle pants that are absolutely just shot. I've taken all kinds of other camouflage material and hot glued patches on all the holes. For the outside of the Beagle part of it, it's just worn right off. The insides are hanging in. The black inside part of the Beagle pants and Beagle wear is so good and strong, and it takes a beating. The outside woolish part, they're 20-something years old. I mean, I have put them through some serious mileage, and they've been really waning. I did manage to find a new set. I have a new pair of pants and a fairly new jacket that we ended up purchasing that have made up for me my old ones. But
I have your, if you want, I have your pants.
yeah, but the pants are really something. You should show them to you here.
There you go.
You know, you can see the patches and the where I've glued on pieces. And of course, the sides of you that would get caught on, stumps or stubs that are sticking out of trees as you walk by them. The pockets themselves take a lot of abuse going in and out all the time. The zippers, and having a good zipper on a pair of pants is important. One that's metal and it's rugged and it'll take the abuse. If you get your pants full and it does this to them a lot, it beats on the zippers quite a bit. The buttonhole is actually worn out. When you wear out a buttonhole, you've got a pretty aged pair of pants. The other place that takes it real hard is the knees, of course. And you can see this huge patch. I've got a half a pant leg from here all the way to here that is just other material that isn't as good as the wool that was originally in those. And it's more of a cotton polyester kind of thing. That is not so good. And when that gets a little bit wet, now all of a sudden I'm wet there, and it's not as good. But the original actual Beagle material, that kind of wool type stuff, was really excellent, and very few things kind of beat that for longevity and wear. And the zipper up the side of the pant leg may be more important for other people than me. I got kind of skinny legs. I can just jam them down in there and go, and ain't had no trouble. But the other place that they'll tend to wear out some, almost all your pants will, is in the crotch, of course, because if you squat down or you step over things and there's a stub sticking up or whatever, like that's an area there that can be a little bit of a trouble. But yeah, they've got some serious miles on them.
Good morning, Neil. Hi, Neil. How are you?
Yeah.
Hi,
Good to
everyone.
see everybody.
Thank you, everyone who's just hopping in. Thank you for everyone who's been here the whole time. Appreciate you guys. This is cool. It's fun.
Yeah.
Fun for us to just
Yeah,
kind of
blast.
shoot the breeze. This is cool. This has been really cool. Yeah, it's one of those things like clothing. Clothing is one of those things that for what we do in New England, it has to be very specific. It has to be really. It has to be weatherproof, but it also has to be quiet simultaneously. It has to be durable, and it also has to be cleanable. So, like some of the stuff that like Stagger's making, and other people that are trying to put together some like really good wool stuff, that's going to be where it's at in a little while. And as they develop their products, they're going to be really, really good.
What was your most challenging buck?
Yeah.
What was yours?
Challenging was, as far as like the skill required to like get a deer or get close to that deer, I would probably have to say tracking 2-step 2 days in a row.
And as far as we know, 2-step is still alive.
Yes, we
this
found,
isn't even a dead buck.
We found,
it's a live one.
his track this season. And yeah, grab our coffees. And so he's still kicking. And we didn't have a chance to really get on him because he's one of those deer that is like halfway impossible for a single person to kill. He never goes out into the open. He stays in stuff you can barely see 15 feet in. And he's right down in the brush. And part of the reason for that was he was a wounded deer that we tracked and tracked and tracked and tracked. And we pulled every trick in the book to get this deer. And then after 2 days, he wasn't as injured as we anticipated. He had a surface wound. But that was back in like 2020.
Could have shot him. Taylor chose to not shoot him.
And he just wasn't. I got him in the scope. Finally, we caught him in his bed. And he just wasn't. He wasn't the deer for me.
We moved him 12 times in those 2 days.
And just you get eyes on him, and he's so alert because he's wounded. And he knew we were coming, in the woods are like the drippy, loud, and like you had to put the boots right to him. And what that did was that just wised him up. So now he's one of those bucks that like we probably, if we really spent time, we could get him. But it would be that like I hop on the track and just shove him out, and we just put dad somewhere, and he comes the other way, and we just try to pinch him.
He's got some patterns.
Yeah.
He keeps running over and over. If
And
he's
they're
in one
good,
spot,
and
he
they work
runs
for
down
him.
this area.
Yeah.
If he's in this spot, he runs over there. We've learned a lot about him because we've spent a fair amount of time on him. And the other thing too is like he's kind of a local legend, and he's just being there. He's not real heavy. He's probably like 180 to
and it's
180 plus.
wide, low, kind of like bullhorn rack. Really widespread, a little bit, at least at the time.
Distinct
we
limp. He still has the limp.
Yep,
and
his
still,
track.
Yeah,
It's the same.
So kind of and there are other buck that are bigger that are kind of right in that area. And I don't know if they're older or not, but like you're going to have that a little bit. The other things, he's got a really good spot.
It was frustrating. I think one of the things that made it one of the most difficult ones was not necessarily catching him and like getting up to him and tracking him as a whole, because he's not going that far that fast, but he would always just be in the perfect spot to catch you and not you catch him. And it was mentally frustrating, especially after 2 days of like just failing over and over and over and over, and then to finally get him in the scope and tracking the 2-step buck. That's that video. And that, if you guys want to see that, we get him on film in his bed, and he kind of just hops off, and it was like he stopped bleeding and everything was fine. So I had made the call. The shot was I had from here forward, or I had his back half, and I just was like, if I shoot him in the back half on this hill, I'm going to get another shot. I can kill this deer. But I just would have had to take a shot at the back half, and he wasn't really the deer, and it wasn't a shot I was really happy with, and we decided to let him go. But what was your most challenging buck? That was mine.
Well, mushroom for sure. Mushroom buck was, he ended up shooting
I think he's
it.
in the background.
But yeah, that was probably one of the tougher bucks.
Yeah, it's one of those
sure.
like
There's
same
a bunch
thing.
of big ones
Same
that have
thing,
gotten
right?
away that have been really tough too. That I never got, and they were really something. Jimmy, there was one there talking about Jimmy's rifle. Jimmy has a
.6 Remington.
yeah,
bolt action.
Remington laminated stock, stainless steel.
Yeah,
he
really
loves
nice,
it. Yeah,
really
odd
nice,
6.
really
Yeah,
nice
great
gun.
gun. We actually talk about it on one of our upcoming ones, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
We got a video coming up of us shooting and stuff. And
Have you guys, Jay asks, have you guys ever had to hang a deer overnight? Not hang it, but we did leave Ryan's deer overnight this year, and that'll be in the video that's upcoming. So yes, and you've left a bunch.
Zigzag, I left him up on the mountain. Fog, another buck I shot, I left him up on the mountain overnight. Yeah, had to do it a few times. You shoot them at the end of the day, and they're 3,000 feet, and it's just like you won't get down. Get everybody, get together, and get back up there, and still have energy enough to drag it out of there. There's been a few times we've had to do that. It's pretty rare though.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you ever thought about teaming up with a wool company? That's more on the lines of what we were talking about earlier.
I have a hard time navigating back roads in Maine late season, where some days I didn't go down Tim Pond Road due to ice. Well, yeah, you're going to have times when like
It's
you're out in the
dangerous
middle,
driving.
you're out in the middle of nowhere, and if you get messed up, you're going to have to come to your own rescue.
Yeah.
And especially like you go on top of a snow machine trail when it's frozen, and then it thaws out later on, and you think you're driving back out, and it warms up to 40 degrees that day because you were shed hunting or something. You're going to have problems, right?
Yeah.
So the other thing is like if you get off the road and not be in the center of it or something, and the dirt just happens to be deep, or it's frozen only on top long enough for you to get the rig out on top of it, and then you get to a spot where it's a little mushy and your rig goes right out of sight and it dies. Some of them landings and stuff, oh boy.
Yep.
Yeah, you got to be careful where you go and what you do, and of course there's a learning curve, right?
Yeah.
There's a learning curve, what solid ground and what isn't solid ground.
One of the other things that we deal with on paper company land that not a lot of other people are going to have to deal with on public land for hunting is we have tractor trailers that we meet on corners, on hills in bad conditions, and they're not stopping.
and a narrow road,
and they're full of logs,
and they're loaded.
Yeah, so it's like you have to be a fairly decent driver, and you just got to go slow and poke along. That's kind of what we do.
Expect the unexpected.
Right. Be
If it's
ready to
bad
dive into the
conditions,
ditch,
yeah.
and stuff like that. And there is a little bit of a risk with driving around and really trying to get somewhere at a clip or whatever. You have to be careful. And it's also their property. And that's one of the things too, is like when we hunt public land, it's technically private land that's open for everybody to hunt. Paper company land is private land, which is why like you can shoot on the road. Like you can't have a loaded gun in the vehicle or anything, but you can shoot off of the road when you're behind the gate on their private land. And it's their roads. They maintain the roads. They're driving on it. They're still working on it. So if you meet a tractor trailer, like, it's he owns the road and you got to get out of the way. And it's a respect thing, but also a safety thing.
And we keep our radios with multiple rigs, and the one that's out in the front running point, he tells everybody, truck coming, get out of the road.
Yeah,
and
you get on the
then
CB
everybody
and you
can
say,
flow
hey,
right
this
through.
dude's coming and you
That's
need to
right.
get off the road.
Yep. Biggest antlered score-wise buck I've ever mounted. I did one 207 inches. That's the largest one that I've done.
And then that thing, whatever
it was
that
a
is.
Boone and Crockett from Ontario. That was the largest wild deer that I've ever done. And then that big 47-point non-typical that came from a fence. I have no idea what that would score. It's
a
got to
lot.
have like 9-inch bases, 10-inch bases. I don't know. They're huge. I can't wrap my hand even halfway hardly around the base. It's so huge. The skull's kind of out of shape. It's just, it's one of them fence things, deer, store-bought deer with a needle.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah, right.
Somebody's manipulated nature into this great big craziness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people having a good time. Have you guys ever hunted Eastern Maine, and out on like down east and out on the coast? No, we haven't, but we've been talking to a lot of people who do hunt that, and one of the people I was messaging early season was William Altman,
Yeah.
and like people are having some phenomenal luck bow hunting.
And they're big deer.
And
Whoa,
out on
they're
like
beauties.
the islands and out on the coast and stuff, and down, because the boys and I actually live in southern Maine, and down that way they have expanded zones that are on the coast, and there are some decent bucks running around, and of course the tags, there's more access to tags and nobody hunting. So one of the things that we were considering was getting into bow hunting and doing some coastal hunting and things like that, and kind of adventuring around, and we want to travel more and get out and experience different styles of hunting in different places, and just have a little bit more fun. But of course, Maine rifle season out in paper company land's always of our deer hunting.
That's what we like to do. One guy's asking which one would you go if you could only go to one. Well, if there's snow everywhere, I would go up there, mostly because of the
Snow everywhere though. If there's snow everywhere,
there's
southern
snow
New
everywhere.
Hampshire, like it's probably gonna get a couple of our boot prints down
Right,
there.
because number one, the
Yeah.
racks are phenomenal.
Yeah.
And the winters are not hard. So there's some young deer even that are really fairly heavy and they're good size. And the racks in New Hampshire is just coming up. If you want bone, you go to New Hampshire.
Yeah, for sure.
Your chances of shooting big bone are better in New Hampshire than Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
The numbers of Boone and Crockett's that they shoot per how many deer they shoot, like New Hampshire is coming up with 1 or 2 or sometimes 3 Boone and Crockett's in a year with a 10,000 kill. That's 1 in 100,000 in Pennsylvania. So like your chances of shooting a really big bone deer are better in New Hampshire than they would be almost anywhere else.
And most of the entire Northeast region. It's
Now,
like
when you
New
go to
York,
big-
Massachusetts, and New Hampshire have just like the phenomenal deer. And if you have
got the
snow down
soil.
there, you want to do that. But
soil for sure.
the only
right?
thing about Maine though is Maine has this space, and Maine has like giant bucks, like 250. You can see some stuff. You might shoot, something bigger than you would anywhere else. Like Minnesota size, Alberta kind of stuff. So
Yeah, you go right to Roscoe
space,
Blaisdell,
yeah.
go right to his
Yeah,
Facebook
seriously.
page and just look at some of the stuff that people are shooting and the pictures is phenomenal. And Southern New Hampshire has some bone in it. It has some genetics there. It has not too hard of winters. And between that and just the good soil, like there's some nice deer in there. Nice deer.
Mark on
and
it.
without the snow, probably more big ones are making.
do you ever plan on going back to Ontario? Yes, because
I'd
I'd
love
like
to.
to go.
Yeah, you've never been.
We were trying to talk a couple of our friends into going. We're gonna try to go back out west and do some hunting this fall, and I'm trying to get some people into traveling and doing that. Maybe Ontario is a stop. Drag Dad back through Ontario.
Yeah, in New York.
80K.
Yeah, New York's definitely got
Yep.
some bone in it. Ain't no question.
Yep,
Yep.
they
Yeah,
do
they
for
are
sure.
getting some nice ones. Look what Joe shoots every year, Joe Danito, and like he's just coming into them beauties, and it goes to show what's on the landscape there.
And Joe, you have to make your own coffee. Here, just bring it up close. Yeah, good morning, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Everyone who's just getting here, appreciate it. We're having fun with the whole, you'll have to bear with some of the technical stuff that we're going through, but we're just having fun. The internet here is trash, so it's probably a little laggy and grainy for you guys, but we're doing our best. Yeah, Neil Pendleton, grab the bow. Yeah, I'm getting into bow hunting a little bit. That's something I would really like to do. One of my dreams would be to track down a 200-pound buck with a bow on snow, like in Maine or New Hampshire. I would really love to do that. That's always been one of my goals, so I'm going to try to make that happen. I had a chance to go for it. Could have got my buck this year with a bow like nothing. And just the overall, numbers that we've been shooting deer at less than 40 yards, and it hasn't been through that kind of nasty stuff. There's always a chance that
Yeah.
when you
And
use
we
them-
all would have had the
Yeah.
opportunity at doe.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know,
Yep. I could have
with a
filled my
ball
tag
even.
a bunch of times.
Yeah.
Just I chose to film them instead. But yeah, so we're gonna experiment with the bows a little bit more. It's also fun. I enjoy shooting a bow. It's something I live in an urban area, so it's something that I can do a little bit more and practice more throughout the year. And it's just a fun sport, and I'd like to bring that into my hunting for sure.
I have a camp, 89 acres.
In the 80K with endless state land out. Love it there. That's awesome.
Yep.
Having that's one of the things is we actually, so a little piece of info that we found out was we rent a camp in Maine, and we've been renting that camp since 2015. And our camp, actually, the lady who owns it is not renting it out anymore. So we're out our deer camp. So we have to we have to find another one or build one or do something. So we're gonna have that'll be coming up in the videos this fall for sure.
Yep.
I hunt in Poland with a fishing gun, Auburn, Lewiston, Maine, so we can use crossbow in city limits in Maine. Wow, that's cool. I didn't realize that.
Well, one of those things, be careful,
Yeah.
A deer flopping around in a neighborhood with an arrow sticking out of it. A lot of people may not care for
Yeah.
that too much.
And it is opinions about what you do, and we just try to represent it the best we can. So if you're gonna hunt urban areas, that's just a risk, You might track through somebody's backyard after following the blood trail, and you're just gonna have to be ready to deal with people.
Yeah, Curtis Smiley from the Vermont Big Game Trophy Club, he'll be up on Tuesday to score racks. He's going to be here to do that a little bit. And yeah, his Facebook page, the club's Facebook page, and some of the deer that were shot in Vermont, really awesome.
Oh, yeah.
It's great to see.
Vermont's got big deer. Don't let
Oh,
anyone
yeah,
tell you they
yeah,
don't.
yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I know a place in Maine not far from where you guys are staying. If interested, I'll let you know. All right, well, maybe.
Follow the buck scrape,
Scrape
1
line.
mile.
Wow, never laid eyes on him. There were a few rubs also. No snow this year either. Should I have just sat and waited for him? Don't know. It's one of those things. Like, there's no shoulds or shouldn'ts. There's no real way to know. Sometimes you just have to go with your gut. Maybe following it would have been the thing to do, and maybe it wasn't. And you're just gonna have to play that out. And that's one of the things that's a little frustrating is there's really no rules. And it's because each deer is different, each situation is different. And when there's no snow, walking on the scrape or the rub line and just still hunting might be the way to go. Sitting might be, but it depends on how old the sign is, depends on where it is in the season. There's a lot of different factors.
How much other hunter pressure is around
How
there?
many other deer are around?
Yeah, if you've got, say, a mountain and there's a scrape line along it somewhere, and it's getting quite a bit of pressure, I would be looking for where the hunters don't go, like security cover somewhere near the scrape line someplace. If there's a swamp, I'd be looking in that. If there's a cliff, I'd be looking on the cliff. Just looking for that extra off to the side kind of thing. A lot of, especially good buck, if it's not rut time going on, they stay off to the side more. Like after the season, if you're looking for a big buck shed, he don't necessarily walk where all the other deer walk. He's off to the side someplace, and usually someplace where he's keeping track of all the people and the other deer and what's going on. Like, you'll see that. And I like to check the nicest security cover near where a lot of sign is, especially early season. Yep. And especially hunted pressure when there's a lot of people around. Yep. Yep. Great job.
Nice. I have a moose head I still got in the freezer. Been working on 5 years.
Ooh, that's a long time. The ears will be fairly freezer burnt, probably.
Yeah.
If a cape in the freezer isn't wrapped real tight.
Or just get it tanned and put it back in the freezer. As
Yeah,
fast
if you're
as
gonna
possible.
store it or something, if you could get it tanned, get it fleshed and salted and tanned, and then put it in the freezer, now you could hold on to it for a while and still be able to mount it a little bit later on and keep it in the freezer, wet tan, and it'll be ready.
Yeah, one of the things that we actually were thinking about doing is doing some live stream stuff while Dad's working on mounts and things. Because we're trying to make creation of content and getting our stories out and the stuff we want to share with you guys and the cool adventures and stuff. We're trying to get that a little bit more streamlined and just easier for us to do. Which is why earlier we talked about bringing on an editor for the team, and that way we can just go out, run this and run a little less laptop, and just because we're so busy, with all the grandkids and kids and the business and taxidermy that needs to be done, we're pretty busy with that. But if you guys like the live stream format, that's something that we can also do too, and we can do some more of this, and it's easier for us to do live stream, really kind of interact, share some stories, share some good info, teach you guys a few things, and likewise have you guys share stuff with us too, and do that while we're going about building everything else. So if you like the live stream stuff, let us know in the comments section, give it a thumbs up, and so we can kind of gauge if there's something cool. This is fun. We just came up with this last night. We're like, let's live stream and see who hops on and at least chat for a minute. So this is fun.
Yeah,
we like this.
Deer wintering areas, and then migrating.
So how do you
migrating
adapt
around wherever you are, and how do you adapt your hunting to that? The biggest part of it that you'll find is like what happens to the weather and the timing of the weather, the rut, and what's happening at elevation. Wherever the snow starts getting deep up on top of the mountains, and they all decide, okay, let's go. Whether you're out west, with elk, or whether you're around here or whatever, wherever the winters and the snow is fairly deep, and those animals are used to leaving an area and pulling out and going somewhere else, you're not going to see them get into a V pattern and migrate. Right? They're not really doing that. No, they'll generally just kind of move down. They'll move downhill, because of course you'll get one big snowstorm that'll be really deep, and it'll be extra cold. It'll be just that one kind of kicker weather event or time frame where they'll be like, oh, and it's not so hot. Now, some animals may pull right out, like those who have already been bred, and they all of a sudden say, that's it, I'm gone, and let's go. Some of them will just take right off and go steady and just come down off a mountain or side hill from mountain to mountain to mountain, down the side of the valley to get to the bottom of the valley, someplace where they're used to hanging out. It might be a 20-mile long valley, and they'll work their way all the way down through the whole thing. I've seen a few doe that just took off right from the very top, and their fawn almost had to hop to keep up with them. And they just took off on a big steady walk and never let up, and just kept going and going, and no feeding, and were leaving, and just took off and went and walked steady and just kept the line for 2.5 miles. I followed one this year, and she came down off the ski area and went down, and just like, we're out of here. And I was like, wow. She had a huge fawn with her too. And they were going my way, so I said, okay, I'll take these two, and maybe I'll just get something on film as I'm leaving. It was the end of the day. And I went from probably 2:30 in the afternoon right till dark, and we went almost 2.5 miles, just boom, straight all the way down through, and really held a fairly straight course and said, we're leaving, and followed the terrain a little bit, but just, I'm coming through. And then there's others that'll pull down and stir around and pull down and stir around. Now, what I found, especially when we first started seeing this when I was young at hunting, was back in Pittsburgh. And like all of a sudden, every deer on the landscape seemed to be going east. And they were all pulling out of Maine and going into Pittsburgh and going down the side of Diamond and working their way down the 2 or 3 valleys that led right into town in Pittsburgh, where they spend the whole winter. And every deer on the landscape was headed that way. It was amazing. A lot of the buck will check those. They'll end up running each other. All these like little fingers, like little drops of water, end up working onto it. And there'll be these little small arteries that will lead into a bigger artery, and then it'll work its way into town. And of course, the thickest, nicest passageways with the most activity before you get to town is where a lot of those bucks would hang out, and they would check all those deer as they were going by, like sharks looking over the river, right, kind of thing. So the bucks would circulate and do all that, and then everyone would generally tell you once they got into the yarding area, the big bucks would come in at night and circulate through them all, and they couldn't find a doe in heat, and then run right back out into the woods and go back up them trails looking for more deer, just in a search for other deer, or to get away from another buck that was more dominant right in there or something. So there's this craziness of back and forth all through, and of course, as they moved closer to town, it was easier to get to, so the more people would hunt them a little bit more. And they ended up shortening the season up there because of that. I'm not sure if it would really kill any absorbent amount
One
of
of
deer.
the one of the things that we were chatting about that you guys might find slightly interesting is it's weird to think of states that have their own deer herd, because we talked to a moose biologist here in Vermont, and he had a collared moose that went from, where did she go from?
Well, in Northeast Kingdom.
Northeast Kingdom,
Granby
and she went
area.
down into White River Junction.
Well, not quite that far, but she worked way down the Connecticut River.
Right,
You know,
crossed into New
40
Hampshire,
miles.
and then went into Maine, and then all the way back on a it's like 200 miles.
Yeah, she went nearly 200 miles.
And
so
and
they go a lot.
And one of the things is, like, as soon as you start thinking about that deer and moose are the herd is a little more, it's a little more of a singular herd. And you kind of look at that on the landscape. You say, like, pull the state lines and the town lines and the city lines off of things. And that's really what we have. We have a herd that's pretty dynamic, and it's one big herd that moves around and shifts a little bit more than we realize. And it's common to have a buck come into a deer yard who is not from that area, who's from a long way. We've had bears that come from Connecticut and that were collared bears. They came up into Vermont, and now they just live here. One day packed up and said, I'm moving to Vermont. And he moved, and we had a boar that moved up into Vermont and just took up residency here.
Amazing.
So it's like, it's also possible that the buck that somebody shot in the center of Vermont is not from there. He's from New Hampshire. Like, that is a very real thing, that, like, the wildlife is it moves like the tide, and it moves, and it, like, we have no idea what deer live where all the time, and some deer will probably be homebodies, and it won't be the majority of deer that are traveling from, Bangor to Concord. They're not doing that, but it is pretty it's a pretty real thing that our herd fluctuates more than we think it does, and it moves more than we think it does. And you might be seeing New Hampshire and Massachusetts deer in Vermont, or you shoot one in Maine that on the border that's lived in Canada, and now he's down here. So what's happening where and how deer really move is a little bit harder for us to really know. And you kind of just, what you have in front of you that day is what you've got, and that's how we always kind of measure it. We're not too concerned too much about migrations and things like that. Our approach is pretty simple. We don't do any scouting, don't do anything. We just go out in the woods, we find a track, we hunt that deer, and we see what we can come up with that day. And we just let whatever happens happen. That's kind of always been our approach, because
Just
like
wing it.
it's so hard to really know the true facts about everything.
You might have a spot picked out where
Yeah.
you want to go, and then you get there and there's 3 rigs there.
Right.
Right? So, like, we're going to turn the wheel and go somewhere else. And there's going to be a certain amount of, like, you're going to have to decide and make decisions. That's what hunting is. It's this nonstop decision-making process, and then living with what you decide. I don't want to go down in there. I do want to go over there, right? And it may be completely the wrong decision for the day. You don't know, and you're going to have to live with it. One of the things that makes you a well-rounded hunter is to be able to make decisions, live with what you decide, and go out and just do it and see how you make out. I was always more worried about my self-improvement and what I could do and my abilities, and to be able to handle anything that comes along and deal with it and do it well. I was more worried about that. So, like, over time, as my abilities grew, and I spent a lot of time, like, not remaking mistakes and learning from everybody. I would go to anybody's deer seminar, even if it was terrible, because I'd learn what not to do, right? Like, no matter what, you can learn something from everybody, and being able to adjust and work with your mistakes you've made, but also improve on your improvements, and then get it done and get good at it. Geez, that's where it comes from, right? And if everybody does that, you'll get really good at stuff after a while. And don't be afraid to make the wrong decision. Sometimes you're gonna, but if you're learning from it every time, and you get all the gifts of your mistakes, and you apply them, now you won't be making those mistakes anymore, and it'll help like crazy. Yeah. One of my neighbors, he's spent quite a bit of time hunting on my land this year, and he's up there pretty good. Mike must be 75 or better, and he's out there just
He still
calling
gives it
and
what he
giving
can.
it all he can, right? And then you'll end up doing that. You do the best you can with what you got, and stay as good at it as you can, and then you got to roll with the punches, whatever happens. And if it's just a spike horn and he wants to stand there and let me film him, I'm going to film him. And I can walk away saying, well, I got a deer today. Even if I didn't shoot him, I could have, right? So now I got a deer today, and that's a good feeling. I got some moose on film or whatever. It's quite a challenge. And the camera part of it and the filming part of it has made it so much more. And it's kept it interesting for us, and we like that part of it. And that's just where we're at.
Yeah. Travis, what are your thoughts on Brownsville Deer Pantry? Do you think it helps the herd?
Well,
That's subjective.
if you got rid of it, it wouldn't be good for them.
Because they're still going to
You're committed. Now, if you went for a walk around there and you saw the woods
That would tell
and
you.
the devastation that they've done to the woods around there, I'm sure every little twig that is deer food within, I don't know how many deer are actually there. Must be maybe 100.
It's got to be a
You know,
few.
100 or more deer per square mile is a recipe for disaster. Like it, and if there was, say, tuberculosis or trichinosis, and one of those deer got it and went to that grain bin and started eating out of it and drooled a couple pieces of corn, and then it went to another one and he got trichinosis and then spread it and spread it and spread it, TB, any of those things. Some of them can stay on a piece of frozen food in the outdoors for almost 2 weeks and still infect another deer. So the disease issue is not
transmissions.
good. And you remember, all those deer will now leave that, go out into the landscape, and then
Interact with other deer, yeah.
interact with other deer and affect other areas. So, if you end it, now there's a price. And it's not so much whether it's good or whether it's bad, but the
Cause
consequences
and effect.
of what you get. And fading it out and slowing it down, I don't know if it would be good. It's trouble. I know deer, I absolutely adore watching deer, right? And that's kind of what we're all doing, is deer viewing. It's kind of a voyeurism at some point, though, because at some point you've seen it and you understand it, and now you don't have to go too crazy seeing it every day. The deer, there's a lot of social interaction that isn't normal for deer. And they're threatening and hierarchies, and the little ones having to get up and spend more time trying to get something to eat, and they eat last, and they eat all the leftover, drooled on leftovers. That's what the little, or at least the least dominant animals eat, the leftovers. That part's not so good. The real dominant ones want to take it all over and run the show and get away. And it's this extra stress that is not normal for deer. Deer are not normally fighting over food on a steady basis every day. It's almost like, imagine people going to Grand Union and eating off the donuts that were placed on the table. And everyone...
With their faces.
Yeah, and with their faces. And biting and drooling on that same table.
It's quite an image.
On top of, like, you could get attacked at any second while you're trying to eat. It's not a normal situation for deer, and it's, if you ask me, it's trouble.
One of the things is you have the literal immediate consequences of doing something like feeding deer. You also have secondary consequences that are harder to measure. And if someone who watches the deer pantry falls in love with deer and they end up wanting to be somebody who does good for the deer because of what they saw, that the small I guess negative consequences of doing it versus the long-term benefits of getting people more invested in deer and learning about them and caring about them and about wild things, that's a side benefit of it that could easily negate any negative consequences in the long term of the deer herd and for wildlife in general. And it was said that beauty would save the world in a way, and that's that's a little it sounds a little contrived, but in a way it's true. It's true. Like when you care about something and you get inspired by something, you might take action. You might start doing something that you wouldn't have to begin with. So that's something to always consider.
Taylor, talking about beauty, right? If you take the killer whale, right, Shamu is locked up and he's in that prison in the pool, and everyone goes to see him in his prison, or the polar bear at SeaWorld, right? And he's going round and round. If he does a lot of good by connecting people with killer whales and them feeling good about them and wanting to care and know that they're out in the world and they're out there, like you've developed a little bit of relationship with one, it may very well help you with your relationship with the whole. And that part of it is good, even though all those killer whales are way too intelligent. And we've learned so much from them. And in a lot of ways, it was a travesty to have them inside of a pool and to put them through all of the things they put through that were kind of unnatural. And then when they turned him loose in the North Sea and thought he would make it, and he didn't, and died on the shore with people, right? Because that's all he could get along with. It's understandable, right? And it's part of a process that humans have to go through in order to better understand and be able to work with not only the wild world and all of what's going on, but each other. There's a lot of good lessons from all that'll apply.
And hunting is a strange thing in general, because we all kind of operate by our own rules, and we have our own preferences, and we have like a minimum standard of conduct for which is the law, that we've all agreed to for the most part. And then you have what your personal restrictions are beyond that. And some people say that food plots aren't okay and baiting deer is not okay, and we at least have to operate by the minimum standard. And you as an individual can do a lot of good things for the deer herd regardless. We had a conversation with two gentlemen that were here at the shop, and the conversation led to that deer hunting and hunting in general doesn't need to be justified by what the side effects of it. And the side effects of hunting are, good, clean protein for your families and for yourself. It's interacting with the wild and helping conserve it and collect the data for the department and the funding that comes from it and all those great things. But hunting as a whole doesn't need to be justified by its side effects. It needs to be justified by the impact that it has on you as an individual and your actions and how you move forward because of your experiences. That's the biggest thing. And that's one of the things that we've always tried to get across in our videos, which is really hard to about that concept at length and get into it in any depth at all. And it's how hunting affects you as an individual. That's the only reason to do it. You do it because you want to, and because it's something you like to do. That it's an experience of tandem, hand in hand symbiosis with nature. Like the deer on the landscape, if he's just out there doing his thing, he's just a deer. But the minute a young kid goes out in the woods and gets a deer for the first time and has that emotional connection with the woods and has this wild experience of taking an animal's life when he didn't actually need to, and embracing all of the different emotions and the different things and doing something that's adult, because that kind of decision making is adult, and that grows you up quick, and it matures you really fast, and it gives you experiences that you can't get any other way. And what that does to you as an individual is almost a justification for hunting as a whole, which is like a super. I'm not trying to get too heady on you guys, but that is something to consider. And like why we hunt truly is a conversation that has to be had, because they were like, wow, I've never heard of it put that way. And it's like, well, if you really sit down and think about it and you kind of like scrape all of on the internet, like take and the impact that they have locally, not the impact that they have as a whole. And the entire herd is not eating on food plots. It is probably pretty significant. We don't test every single deer, so there's no way to know if one has. We don't know. Unless you test, you're not gonna know. And anything, like I heard something interesting. It was like anything you don't measure, you don't care about. And like that is not a jab at anybody, but it's true. You know, like we measure ages because we're interested and we care. We measure antlers because we're interested and we care. We weigh the deer because we're interested and we care. And you know, that's just something that
If
we
we're
have to
making
keep
them
in mind.
toxic by spraying Roundup all over those food plots, and
Yeah.
we don't care and we don't ever measure it,
Yeah.
definitely. If I have to, most of the time,
To each his own.
there's plenty of good stuff on the landscape that deer love to eat. There's plenty of natural stuff that's already growing there that if you limed and fertilized and it grew well, that's all you'd have to do is just enhance what's already going on in the landscape. Most of the time, a chainsaw is the deer's best friend.
Can't wait for you guys to get DSL.
Oh, I know. Like
Dial up.
we're not far from getting actual like
Fiber optic and
fiber
Yeah,
optics
yeah.
and everything. We're not far from that, but
Yeah.
it's coming. But it's
So
gonna be a
hopefully
little
you
while.
guys are enjoying this. We'll probably start wrapping up here in a few minutes. The playback will be on there, so anyone who joined in late, who didn't get to see the beginning and like some of the actual like hunting stuff that we were chatting about, you can watch that.
Yep.
And if you guys have any other questions, pop them in the comments section. We'll kind of blaze right through them real quick. Hello from Maine. Hello from Michigan and Vermont. And hi, Brad. Yes, we're gonna hunt Vermont sometime, but it comes at the end of the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
EHD is kind of the first of our deer disease. Kind of mostly seems to show up in the lower part of the Champlain River Valley kind of thing. So there's a little bit of an issue there, and it'll probably revolve around things being dry and the water and the midge and that kind of stuff. That Vermont, I
You know, wearing the orange and having a good time.
love watching you guys. Some of your
Yeah.
guys' stuff is awesome.
Yeah, awesome. Very cool. Lots of cool videos in the works. Gonna get some of that stuff out to you. Cool stuff that's been coming down the pipeline for us. I'm sure you guys have all kinds of things going on too. Hopefully you guys enjoyed what we did. Dad did a good one about calling, another one about we kind of did a little bit of the master class as well, so that'll be coming out. We might hold some stuff if you guys are interested and late into the winter, maybe right before fall. If you want to do that too, let us know.
Yep.
That'd be really cool. Love this. Enjoy your day. Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who's been here. We appreciate it. We will see you guys next time. Happy hunting, and
Happy New Year.
thanks for tuning in. We'll
Yep.
see you. We'll do another one of these pretty quick, and we'll so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right.
How'd it go?
It was good. We like these people. Everybody's awesome. You guys are so cool. Wicked. Love it.